Hi, Coach Jeff here, and today I want to tell you about how I lost $3 million in real estate, managed to take that $3 million loss and turn it into a $7 million loss in another business of mine, and then subsequently was able to get back to basics, get back to par, and start making money again. It's an interesting story. It's going to take me a couple of minutes to kind of unroll this thing for you. I learned this business flipping houses in the late 90s from a guy named Ron LeGrand. He had some great basics that I followed down to the letter, exactly what he told me for a number of years, literally from 99 to probably 2007. We had gotten so successful at flipping houses, we were doing so much volume in terms of these houses we were flipping that we got a little cocky, a little arrogant. And we started to, as I like to refer to it, as believing that gravity didn't apply to us anymore. In other words, we could just float, never touch the ground. We could make money ad nauseum, blah, blah, blah. So I'd made a chunk of money in the early 2000s. And just before the big crash, the big recession, the Great Recession of 2007-8, I took a chunk of that money and bought a number of rental houses. Now, I was not in the rental house business, and I'm still against owning a bunch of rental houses, and this is going to tell you why. But we ended up buying a bunch of properties. Some of them were going to be fixed and flipped, but a bunch of them were going to be bought and put renters in there or tenant buyers in there, that type of thing. And there were several hundred houses that I bought in bulk, spent a chunk of money on these things, and immediately, and I just figured, I could rent them no matter what. Even if the market crashed, I could still put people in them. I didn't do my due diligence. I bought in bulk, did a cursory look at these properties, and at that point I was doing virtual real estate, but I didn't have anybody go look at them. I wasn't even sure what I bought, but they were cheap and they were bulk, and I spent a lot of money, and I figured there was no way I could lose, right? Because I hadn't lost on hardly any properties up to then. So immediately the market crashes. The $3 million of purchase goes to about zero. It was probably $4 million, probably dropped to about $1 million in value immediately, because these were kind of lower end homes, not in the best parts of town. A lot of them were in bad shape. The ones that were in good shape, nobody wanted to live in them because they were in bad parts of town. Anyway, my lender at the time, and I had borrowed a chunk of that money. I'd put in a chunk of cash, but I'd borrowed a chunk. The lender at that time realized, because he was also in the business, he realized that this was a bad situation and came up with an interesting proposal that I give him essentially some equity in another business that I own in exchange for those loans. In other words, wipe out the loans and he'll own a piece of a big farming operation that I had. And we did that successfully, and now I had 300 or 400 junk homes that had no debt on them, but still had zero value. So immediately on my books, I had about a $3 million loss, but I had offset it by selling him $3 million of equity in this farm property I had. Well, it turned out the farm deal was just starting to take off. Over the next 10 years or so, the value of those farms rose significantly, and I had lost out on about a $7 million gain. So I took a $3 million loss in houses, parlayed it into a $7 million loss in the farming operation. And at that point, I just threw up my hands and said, forget it. I don't want to do this thing anymore. Everything I touch goes to crap. And I thought back to what my mentor had taught me, the basics, making sure you look at every single house as if it is your only profit opportunity. Never get cocky, never get arrogant. You're only as good as your last deal, and actually the next deal could be worse. So you've got to be very, very cautious on what you do, and then just following the basics for each house. Make sure you have a known exit strategy. Don't buy in bulk. Don't be a landlord unless you can avoid it. And I still hate being landlords. I own a bunch of these houses still today. A bunch are boarded up, but we sell them off a few at a time here and there. Still don't have a ton of value, but I was able to get back to the basics, follow my mentor's instructions to a T. And I was able to start buying 1, 2, 3, buying properties, flipping them, buy properties, flipping them, buy other businesses, flipping them, different things like that. And I was able to go ahead and get myself back above water, and then subsequently start making a decent income again, and eventually offset all of the losses that I had, plus some. Hard lesson to go through, took probably 10 years of my life out of that deal, and it is not something I'd recommend for anybody else. At any point in time, you're better off learning the lessons from guys like me who've done that stupid crap than you go out and do the stupid crap on your own and then telling me about it. It's much easier for you to learn from somebody who's had these lessons already. Go with the basics, do what your mentor tells you, go slow, look at each single property as a single profitability thing, and build yourself a system that you follow and you never, ever, ever veer from. And that was the biggest problem that I did, is we had a system, but I veered from it because once again, I thought gravity didn't apply to me anymore because I'd been so successful doing onesie twosies that why couldn't I do 200 at a time? It didn't work like that. So bad lesson learned, good lesson learned from there on out. And that's what I preach today, even though I've done and been involved in thousands of transactions. There was those 300 or 400 that were really bad, caused everything else to go into crapper, but I was able to get it back by getting back to the basics. So stick with the basics, stick with the system, do what your mentor tells you, do exactly what he does and don't do anything more, and go out there and make some money. There's a lot of money to be made in good markets and bad markets, and to be able to think that you can outsmart the hedge fund guys and things like that just doesn't work, in my opinion. Stay small, make a lot of money, stay below the radar, and enjoy yourself.